Hi guys, and welcome to my second video about working as a coordinator for international relations as someone with a physical disability. Now for this video I'm going to sort of focus more on pre-planning, I guess, and I think that this is a really important aspect of joining the JET program for everyone, whether you have a disability or not, but I think it's something that a lot of people overlook. Because the JET program is very, very competitive. It's getting more and more competitive as the years pass. If you actually look at the statistics, there are less and less people being hired as part of the JET program, even though there's more people applying, particularly with the poor economic climate in the United States and all around the world. So I really do think it is important, and obviously the earlier you start pre-planning, the better. But having said that, it's never too late, I guess. It's always, even if you're planning to apply this year, there's still plenty you can do to make yourself a better candidate for the JET program. Now, coming back to applying as someone with a disability, I think the first thing you need to really ask yourself is it realistic for me to go to Japan on the JET program and be independent? Because I really don't think that it's possible to go on the JET program as someone that requires assistance or that requires special living arrangements. Now, having said that, the JET program, as part of your placement, they will try to place you, if you have specific requirements in terms of medical requirements, they will try to place you somewhere that has access to those facilities. Now, when I say access to those facilities, I'm not talking about like necessarily an accessible apartment in terms of for someone who has issues walking or something like that. I mean more in terms of, for instance, I know one person at least this year who's a cancer survivor and requires regular checkups has been placed close to a hospital where they can provide those checkups. So that kind of thing is what they can provide, but I don't really think they can provide anything in terms of living arrangements or anything like that, or assistance in day-to-day life. So it is quite limited. I may be completely wrong, but that's the impression that I've come away with. And I should probably add at this point, I mean, obviously this is just, I'm not doing these videos as an official part of my work as a CIR, which I haven't started doing yet anyway. So a lot of this is my own opinion, but I think it is common sense as well. Now, you really do need to evaluate whether it is possible, and not just for people that have mobility issues, but I think stuff like there was someone on the JET program forums a couple of weeks ago who has a speech impediment, and they said, well, can I become an assistant language teacher? And I guess common sense would be the case here. I mean, if you've got a bit of a lisp or a bit of a stutter, it probably wouldn't be an issue. But if you've got a huge speech impediment and it's really hard to make out what you're saying, then I really don't think that would be possible, purely because modelling sentences and stuff as an assistant language teacher is a big part of what you do. Even as a coordinator for international relations, some of the time you do have to do interpretation or interpretation, or showing people around or answering phones, that kind of thing. So really you have to ask yourself, you have to be realistic with yourself. And if you do have a physical disability and you've never been to Japan, I think it really is important to get over there and just see how you go. Just for a short trip, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe bring someone that can give you a hand. Because there is this image in the West of Japan being this really technologically advanced place. You see all this stuff like, you see these videos of robotic suits that are supposed to, may one day help people with disabilities and that kind of thing. But the reality is that Japan, in a lot of ways, is really lagging behind a lot of the Western world in terms of disabled access. Even in Tokyo, I mean, obviously the capital city, the biggest city, it is a real nightmare for someone with a disability to get around. I don't even know how you would go about doing it in a wheelchair because there aren't always elevators, particularly in places like the Tokyo subway system. Generally, there are chairlifts to get down to the platform if there's not an elevator, but I don't know if that's always the case. Sometimes the elevators are really poorly signposted. Sometimes, as I said, there's just no elevators at all. So public transport is a bit of a nightmare. And then on top of that, you've got getting into restaurants and stores. You know, a lot of the restaurants and the stores are really narrow, really small, so there's not really room for a wheelchair to get through. There may be a step in front of the store with no ramp up to the step, and it might be quite a big step. You may find that the apartments, a lot of apartments may not have elevators. If you're living in a 2-story house, there will probably be a really, really steep staircase. I find the staircases they have in Japan to be a real challenge because they are almost vertical. They're really, really steep. They're really dangerous as well. And luckily, I've never had an accident walking up or downstairs because I am really paranoid about it. But if you do have those kind of issues, this is the kind of thing you need to consider. And I think going to Japan and showing that you can live over there independently is a really important part of applying for the JET program as someone with a disability, because they need to see that you can do it. And it's no good they want you to succeed. They don't want to send you over there and have you fail and have to come back and not cope. You've got enough going on when you go over there without having to find out that you're having a lot of issues with your mobility or with whatever kind of disability you have. So really, I would say to get over to Japan as many times as you can before you apply for the JET program. And I mean, realistically, I'd say try living over there for 6 months or a year, independently. Now, in my case, as I said in my previous video, I lived in Japan for a year on exchange, but then on top of that, I've probably spent another year on top of that just travelling to Japan. I've got a girlfriend over there, so we fly backwards and forwards. So I worked it out the other day. I think I've been to Japan over 10 times, and most of those trips were sort of 2 weeks or more. So in total, and some of those trips were 3 months as well. So when I worked it out, I've probably spent about 2 years, getting on to 2.5 years in Japan. And I think that's really good evidence that I can survive over there and that I don't have any issues. Now, a second part of this sort of second language, long-term planning process, I think this is sort of two-tiered. One is deciding how many times you're going to try for the JET program. And the reason I say this is because it is a really long application process. You apply in November, you don't find out whether you've got an interview or not until February, and then you don't really find out until if you pass the interview until April. So you're looking at about 6 months, and you're constantly wondering, have I done it, or have I passed, or have I not passed? And it's a huge chunk of time that you can't make any long-term plans. You can't make any long-term decisions because you don't know what you're doing. And obviously it is really stressful. You try not to think about it too much, but it is stressful and you do worry. So I think it is important to decide that limit for yourself. And I decided personally that I would try 2 times. So I tried once in 2011, didn't get up to the interview stage. Again in 2012, and as you all know, I've got placement and I'm waiting to go over now. So that's a happy ending at least. And the second part is backup plans. For if JET does fall through. And I think this is really important because as I said, the waiting time is so long. If you don't have anything else going on and you've waited all this time, it can be really devastating, and it also puts a lot of pressure on you. I mean, that's 6 months of time where you're constantly wondering what's going to happen, and if you don't have anything solid lined up, personally, I had 4 different backup plans. Some of those involved getting to Japan in different ways. Some of them didn't involve going to Japan at all. So I had a real range of options there. And then on top of that, I think experience is another really important part of, particularly for someone with a disability, for anyone. Obviously, like I said, it is getting more competitive. Experience and being a well-rounded candidate. As I said previously, I'm JLPT 1, but I'm not just JLPT 1. I've worked on my business Japanese skills, my Keigo. I'm at the stage with my Japanese where I can read books without novels aimed at adults without the use of a dictionary. I can understand, TV shows, movies, that kind of thing. On top of that, I've worked as a freelance translator on and off for about 3 years now. And then on top of that, I've got a English teaching certification, English as a second language teaching certification. I also, when I was at university, worked as I was the president of my university's Japanese language club. And no, I wasn't the one that made that club. It had been around for years, so that sort of added as well. So time living in Japan as well, like I said. And my major itself was Japanese studies, with specialising in Japanese language. My job that I did last year, now it was only temp work, but it was dealing with people from other cultures. It was very high pressure, high stress. I had to deal with emergency situations, and I was actually put into a senior position as part of that job as well, which was even higher pressure and higher stress. So, and then on top of that, I really tried to network as much as I could as well. I started participating in some of my city's JET Alumni Association events. Now, obviously, I wasn't a member because I'm not a member of JET, but they did have events that were open to the public, so I started to go down to those regularly. People began to recognise me, obviously, and I began to recognise them. It worked out really well because one of the people that interviewed me was actually the head of the JET AA, and I mean, we're not really close friends, so it didn't really provide me with any sort of advantage in terms of, hey, I'm going to give him the position because he's my mate, but he knew my face and I knew his face, and it feels a lot better to go into an interview knowing, at least one member of the panel. And then on top of that, I'd also applied for a job at the Japanese consulate in my city last year, and I didn't get that job. But two of the people who were on the panel also interviewed me as part of that job. So really, out of 4 people, I knew 3 of them. I knew of 3 of them. And again, not close friends, so it didn't really provide me with an advantage in terms of any of that. But it really, it does feel good to go into an interview and know 3 out of 4 people that are interviewing you. So it's all this kind of thing. It is this, just making sure that you are a really, really well-rounded candidate, especially more so for someone with a disability. Because, we'd all love it, I think, if disability didn't play a part in being employed and getting a position and stuff like that, but it does. And the competition for JET is fierce. So really you need to be better than people, I think, that don't have disabilities. Because, at the end of the day, the panel are going to be as fair as possible. But there is no actual protection in Japan against discriminating against someone who has a disability when it comes to employment. So I don't really know how that all comes together, but obviously you do want to be the best candidate you possibly can be. They say that to become a CIR you need at least JRPT2. As I said, I was JRPT1. I had a teaching certification. I've done all this, I've done all that. My Japanese is at a really high level. I speak business Japanese, and I use that business Japanese in my interview. I've worked as a translator, all this kind of stuff that I've tried to bring together. And then doing work in a really stressful environment as well. And I didn't exactly plan all of that either. It's just sort of come together, but it's worked out really well. So anyway, I think that's about it. I just wanted to provide a bit of an idea if you are looking at in terms of long term, even if you only have a few more months before you're going to apply. I think that there's a lot that you can do to improve your chances. Maybe do some volunteer work, do some stuff to push yourself some more. Again, if you have any questions, like I said in the last video, leave a comment below. If you're disabled and looking at getting onto JET, or you're living in Japan, definitely get in contact. Rate the video. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.